Welcome to the AP U.S. History Study Guide, Period 1, 1491 to 1607. This online guide will enhance your skills, whether you're taking the course this year, reviewing for the exam, or getting a head start on next year's course. Watch this video, then check out ap.gilderlehrman.org for documents, lectures, interactive timelines, videos, and a whole lot more. Thanks from the Gilder Lehrman Institute.
Our first period will cover three main themes: contact, commerce, and competing philosophies. This initial period covers the time period from 1491 to 1607, from before Columbus's arrival to the founding of Jamestown. But let's start with the theme of contact. Before the arrival of Europeans, native populations in North America developed a wide variety of social, political, and economic structures based in part on interactions with the environment and each other. For both peoples, contact changed absolutely everything. You must keep in mind that before Columbus discovered the New World, it was peopled by hundreds of varied and sophisticated cultures. These pre-Columbian Native American societies were composed of complex structures and operated with a focus on their interaction with the environment and a society stratified based on the capabilities of the people involved. When thinking about these societies, you can dig deeper by looking at the documents in the Supplemental Study Guide, including Sekotan and Algonquin Village in 1585. This image will give you a visual reference for any question or written piece you may be asked to write for different sections of the exam. Remember, evidence from detailed visuals can be equally as important as written documents. For this era, you should also consider referencing the Aztec city of Teotihuacan, or modern-day Mexico City, or the many complex attributes of the Southwest Pueblo civilizations. Once you've established an understanding of the complex nature of pre-Columbian society, we come to the second key concept of the AP U.S. History exam, and that will be the theme of commerce. Let's start this discussion by remembering that European overseas expansion resulted in the Columbian Exchange, which was a series of interactions and adaptations among societies across the Atlantic. With this exchange, we can identify a multitude of goods and an equal number of bads. Okay, so once the door was open, we have Columbus landing, taking in the intense differences between Europe and the New World, the idea and want for riches and gold, and the barriers and opportunities that were presented by both. Go deeper into this and check out the landing of Columbus in 1492 and Columbus reports on his first voyage in 1493 to read first-hand accounts of his entry into Hispaniola. Read about the sights, the smells, the astonishment of Columbus and his crew as they met this positively different new world. Columbus's arrival in the Caribbean marked the beginning of the first large-scale interaction and exchange between nations. Europe and the Americas were flooded with new goods, ideas, and riches that promised to change the global dynamic forever. So, this brings about a great deal of potential issues, but the real question is this: what were the long-spanning impacts of this era of contact on both the New World and the Americas? The Columbian Exchange literally created a biological marketplace between the New and Old Worlds. This interchange of goods, wildlife, plants, and more revolutionized almost every aspect of life, or death, for people in both Europe and the New World. People. A vast preponderance of people came from the Old World to the New World. Only handfuls of people went from the New World to the Old. About 4/5 of people brought to the New World between 1492 and 1820 were from Africa, and they were enslaved. Animals. Europeans brought the animals to recreate their lives. This had a massive effect on the flora and fauna of the New World. The arrival of the horse also changed lifestyles of Pampas and Plains Indians, allowing them to survive as cohesive groups longer. Plants. 3/4 of today's foods grown for crops originate in the New World. Corn and potatoes had especially big effects on European and African societies, spurring massive population growth and dependency, as in Ireland, which led to a famine after a potato blight. Cash crops, or desirable commodities, in the New World began to sustain the system. Examples of this would be tobacco, vanilla, chocolate, and cotton. Microbes. Disease predominantly moved from the Old World to the New. Some examples would be smallpox, measles, and influenza. Consider the immense impact of this on people never having any contact with these kinds of ailments. Pre-contact population numbers are debated, but death tolls at this point reached 80% in many areas. This brings us to our third key concept, dealing with the theme of competing philosophies. This final concept of the first period deals directly with how, when different cultures meet, there is potential for immense conflict. People were faced with changes, whether they were ready for it or not. Make sure you look closely at both the Doctrine of Discovery from 1493 and the writings of Bartolomé de las Casas in 1550, as he openly debated the motives of European discoverers and the impact of their actions on the indigenous peoples upon their arrival. Regardless of whose ideas won out, the end of this period marked a time in Europe where many nations, from Little Holland to powerful Spain, began campaigns to march into new, previously uncharted territories in an attempt to spread their influence. As a final thought, you must remember, it wasn't just for the material wealth of the New World that empires contested. Religious reformation played out as Protestants and Catholics contested for the souls of those living in the New World. And, as Europeans began to question the treatment of native peoples under their colonial labor systems, new workers needed to be found. The slave trade would eventually bring 5 times as many Africans as Europeans to the New World before 1820. This brings us to our first skills focus. For this section, we're taking a look at the multiple choice questions. You'll have 55 minutes to answer 55 questions. This section will amount to 40% of your overall grade, so answering all questions, even if you're not sure, is a good payoff. AP multiple choice questions are about a lot more than straight factual knowledge. You're not going to be asked to pick between the 4 dates of the Mayflower Compact or the correct spelling of the 14th US president. Is Pierce IE? Is Pierce EI? That's not really important right now. It's more about your interpretation of the ideas presented, looking at a map and reasoning out the answer using geography and map skills, examining a timeline and drawing a conclusion, or interpreting a political cartoon or a painting. The questions will be drawn from all 9 time periods, and for each, you'll be asked a series of questions. I've got a sample question that we'll review. It starts with a graph that focuses on population increase or decline over a period of time. The question reads as follows. The pattern on the graph from 1630 to 1750 reflects which of the following? A. Conflicts with Native Americans. B. A growing dependence on indentured servants until 1700 when slavery increased significantly. C. The English tradition of primogeniture resulted in an influx of migration. Or D. The exclusive dependence on African slavery. To answer this question appropriately, we'll go through 2 steps. Step 1. Look closely at the graph provided. Pay attention to the labels on the axes and the numbers that mark both population and years. This is the information you'll need to interpret and understand to answer the question correctly. Also, it is essential that you pay close attention to the key at the bottom so you know what the graph's data is showing a measure of. In this case, we were looking at population in the thousands, span of years in question, and types of people arriving in the New World. Step 2. Read the questions carefully. This one is about identifying patterns on a graph. Identify key language that relates to the information on the graph. This would be whites, Indians, and Africans. Identify where the information begins to match up. White and black populations show some similarities. And finally, eliminate implausible answer choices. For C, there'd have to be an impossible number of firstborn Englishmen coming to the New World for this to be true. For D, the word exclusive cuts out all aspects of white indentured servitude, which was still a reality during the time period shown on the graph. This brings us to the correct answer, which is B. Though the drop in Native American population could have resulted from extensive conflicts with colonists of different European nations, the graph shows more substantial support for the comparison between increasing numbers of white Europeans matched up with a sharp increase of African slaves around 1700. Most questions will require this kind of interpretation, not just a rote memorization of AP US history facts. Keep your eye on the time, and remember, it is worth your while to answer all of the questions. You can get more practice with the supporting materials and documents attached to the AP US History Study Guide on the Gilder Lehrman website.